time of your busy schedules today to attend this session. We greatly appreciate your support. Dr. Menon, would you like to come in here? Prof Marwala, welcome. Just a few words of introduction. The Division for Teaching Excellence, formerly known as the Division for Academic Planning, Quality Promotion, and Academic Staff Development, believes that being and becoming a good academic in higher education involves a process of continuously engaging reflectively to improve our teaching and research practices. And to this end, the division annually organizes a series of sessions to provide academics with a platform for discussions and engagements with the view of modeling and sharing insights on different strategies that could improve teaching and learning, particularly as we continue to engage with remote teaching and blended learning. The first session for 2022, taking place under the theme, The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born, The Academic Journey, will be presented by our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Tshilidzi Marwala. The theme was inspired by an interesting and insightful book titled
Prof Naidu.
But are you talking?
Prof Peterson.
We wanted to at least.
Prof Peterson, we can see you. Could you switch off your video?
Tanya is. Yeah. I'll show you. Yes.
Marita Peterson.
Marita, can you switch off your video, please? Thank you.
So I was saying that the theme of these sessions are inspired by an interesting and insightful book titled The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born, written by Aikwe Amar from Ghana. The division is of the view that the South African higher education system needs to nurture the beautiful ones who would in future be able to competently champion teaching, learning, and research in our universities. This is the first of 3 sessions organized to take place in the first semester of 2022 under this theme, and Professor Marwala will reflect on his academic journey, highlighting the importance of developing a research niche, as well as maintaining visibility through academic branding. Professor Marwala does not really need any introduction because you know him very well, so here's just a summary of his illustrious achievements. Professor Marwala is the Vice-Chancellor and Principal of the University of Johannesburg. Prior to this, he was the Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research and Internationalization and the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment. He served as the Deputy Chairperson of the South African Presidential Commission on 4IR and currently serves on the Namibian Commission. He holds a Doctor of Philosophy in Engineering from Cambridge, a Master of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Pretoria, and a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the Case Western Reserve University, Cleveland, USA. He has published 23 books on AI and registered 5 patents. He is an accomplished scholar with multidisciplinary research interests that include the theory and application of AI to engineering, computer science, finance, social science, and medicine. Most notably, he has done extensive research on missing data and its applications to the monitoring of structures, the application of AI in health to detect pulmonary embolisms and epileptic activity, and the use of AI to predict interstate conflict and the impact of AI on economics. So Prof. Marwala, we're looking forward to hearing you today. The floor is yours, and we will open up for questions after that.
No, thank you very much, Camila and Kirti, for organizing this session. And I'm quite excited to be speaking under the title, The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born. Of course, I am a great fan of the book, The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born. In fact, in the book I wrote last year, titled Leadership Lesson from the Books I Have Read, The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born, is one of the books that I describe and I draw leadership lessons from. Now, let me just to briefly, before I get into the topic, just to briefly talk about why I was inspired by the book, The Beautiful Ones. If you actually look at the spelling of the beautiful, you will realize that it is deliberately misspelled. And of course, the way it is introduced into the novel by Aikwe is through a truck that was passing by, and the protagonist of the story reads what is written behind the truck. And it was written, "The beautiful ones are not yet born," and it was misspelled. Of course, you would imagine that it was misspelled because the person who wrote it could not spell it correctly. But it has a bigger meaning because the story is about Ghana just after independence and before the first coup, and everything around seemed to be deteriorating. Corruption was at an all high level, and philosophically, what this topic says is that if everything is crumbling, are the beautiful ones, which means the people who are capable of doing good things, are they there? If they are not there, they are not yet born. And obviously, the question that we ought to ask ourselves is, when are they going to be born? And as educators, the question that we ought to ask ourselves is that what role do we have to play in order to get these beautiful ones who are capable, who are ethical, and who are able to do good in our society, and they are not driven by the self, but by the collective. So, and as educators, the answer is significant. Our role as educators in creating the next cohort of leaders in our society cannot be emphasized enough. It is actually quite significant that we have to play our role in creating this cohort of leaders who are able to deal with the complexity of the world in an ethical manner, so that the greater good of all of us is served. I think that is quite important. So now, what does it mean for us? What does it mean for us? I became, an educator for a number of reasons. I just lost my father a few weeks ago. I buried him just over 2 weeks ago, and he was a teacher. He was an educator, and maybe that is where I got the idea of being a teacher. I'm not going to use the word professor. I'm going to use the word teacher, because it's such an important term. So my father was a mathematics teacher, a good one, a celebrated one, who taught many people in that part of the world. And one of the things that I absolutely was impressed about was the number of people he taught. I mean, just to name a few, the chief of the South African National Defence Force was at one stage in my father's classroom. So the impact that we have on society is quite huge. In fact, somebody once said that if you want to see the character of any nation, you don't have to go and sample the people at random. You just have to go and look at the character of its teachers. The teachers, whatever they do, if then they are not serious about their work, the population that is going to emerge is not going to be serious about their work. So it is absolutely very, very important for us to take our role as teachers extremely, extremely seriously. So for me, it began with my father in my own home when I was growing up, that I appreciated the extent of teachers and how influential they are in society. Because whether I went to the clinic, whether I went to the hospital, people seem to know who my father was. Part of the reason is because he would have taught many of the people. Small geographical area, but significant nonetheless. And of course, as I was preparing myself in this journey, you have to equip yourself with good education. And I took the concept of good education very, very seriously. So I was at the place where I was born, and I just drove around just to see the places where I went to school, and what were some of the elements that made me the person I am. So I studied in my village until standard 5. Now they call it grade 7. And everything was done in mother tongue. I couldn't quite understand English. And then when I went to high school, I went to boarding school, not very far from where in fact, less than 3-4 kilometers from where I lived. And it was, to me, the opening up of the world. A small place, but it was for the first time. I was, I was outside, studying outside my village. It was for the first time that I encountered teachers who were not necessarily from the place. They were from the broader South Africa. They were of all races. Yeah, I had many white teachers. In fact, my principal was Mr. Theron, who was a well-known principal of the time. I had teachers from the Philippines. I still cannot understand where the teachers from India and the Philippines ended up in the middle of some rural area in Venda. But it was obviously obvious that was a deliberate recruitment, because we're not talking about one teacher, we're talking about many teachers, and their children were in our class. And I think part of education is being exposed to different views, being exposed to different ways of doing things. I mean, I still remember the first time I visited India. I went to a place where Indira Gandhi was assassinated, and she was assassinated just shortly before I got into high school. And I remember a friend of mine who actually came from India, who was my high school classmate, explaining to me about this assassination. I must have been like, 11, 12, or 13. Zubair Patel, he's a well-known businessman in that part of the world where I come from. And he was explaining to me, and he was describing the people who were involved, who were involved in religious terms. I think it was one of a Sikh, a Sikh god, and of course, Sikhism is a religion, and the knowledge that one got out of that conversation, it was about politics, it was about religion, it was about culture, it was about tragedy, and it's very important that in the environment in which we do our work is enriched by multi-ethnic, multi-racial, and and any form of multi-experiences is very, very important to be a good teacher and to be a good academic. Just quickly going forward, so I finished, I changed high schools, and I ended up at a famous high school called Mbiri. Quite an impressive high school. I had quite inspiring classmates, you know. Right from my class came a CEO of Daimler Chrysler. Out of my classroom came a CEO of General Electric South Africa. Editor of City Press was also in my class. So it was a very enriched experience. But by that time, I became interested in science. I was always interested in science, but by that time, one is now thinking about what to do next. I ended up choosing mechanical engineering for no other reason except the fact that a friend of mine chose it, and it just sounded much more sophisticated than electrical engineering. No offense to those who are trained in that domain, you know. So sometimes we choose, and we choose. Our choices are random. I would say my choice of mechanical engineering was a random choice, absolutely random, you know. But still, despite the fact that our choices have not been thought very deeply about, you know, we still make good choices, you know. And then one thing appeared, which I did not quite, you know, expect. You know, I had never left Venda up to that point, and Anglo American was taking young people who were going to undergo a leadership training. And we were going to go to Johannesburg. We were going to go and live in a hotel. Certainly for me, it was going to be for the first time, you know. And then we were selected, and then we stayed next to Bunting Road campus. There used to be a hotel called not Bunting Road, DFC campus. It looks the buildings looks abandoned completely. Whenever I go to Doornfontein, I see. In fact, it is abandoned. It used to be called the Johannesburg Hotel. It's walking distance to Doornfontein, and there we were being taught about leadership, and I met many people. Some of the people who came and taught us about leadership is actually the husband of one of our newest members of council, Miss Nosipo Bulupe, you know. And even there, I mean, the people now, I was meeting people from beyond South Africa, beyond Venda. You know, the now chairman of the CSIR was also in the room. So very exciting, because they came from all parts of South Africa. And it was quite an eye opener to the world of technology. And then the following year, I took Science Olympiad, and I ended up representing South Africa in London, which was literally the first time I left South Africa. And in many paths that I walked during that time, whether it is the Science Museum, I later worked as a postdoctoral fellow, actually at the same place at Imperial College. That's where we used to do most of our lectures there. You know. And it was during that time that we were introduced to the future technologies that are going to change the world. You know, they never really changed the world. I can't remember artificial intelligence. Certainly, the name does not. I can't remember it. I'm sure it probably was there, but what I remember was that the superconductivity and its impact on transportation, with levitated trains and so on and so forth, was a much more talked about piece of technology than artificial intelligence. Now we know that artificial intelligence is much more impactful than superconductivity. Again, you can never see the future. That was one lesson that I learned from there, that the future is always uncertain. Whatever we are certain about is probably going to be less likely to happen. Probably means there's still a small probability that it can still be important. As we make choices, as we make decisions, we always have to bear in mind of that. But I was particularly moved. I was living at the International House, and that is not very far from Adam Habib's current office now. You can be able to see the International House from his office, and I was telling him that I walked on those lawns between his office and the International House at the age of 16, 17, for the first time outside the country, almost alone, So that is, and I thought that was actually quite a life-opening experience, because from that moment, the idea of studying outside South Africa came into being. To fast forward, I decided to do A-levels after matric at St. John's College in Johannesburg, because now I was thinking about going overseas. And I had a brief stint as a student waiting for the Global North academic year to begin, which is normally the second half of the year. 6 months I had to keep myself busy. So I went and registered for the degree in mechanical engineering at the University of Cape Town. Thank God I did not stay there for too long. I much rather prefer University of Johannesburg over University of Cape Town. So I ended up in the United States as a student. And one of the things that the Americans do very, very well, I really appreciated American education. The first thing that they really, really do well is multidisciplinary educational experience, which became very, very useful in my research career, which really is multidisciplinary. And I will talk about that much, much later. So when I arrived there, there were courses that I couldn't quite understand. The first course I couldn't quite understand was physical education. You had to take physical education. It had 0 credit, which means it's not graded, but you can't, it appears on your transcript with 0 credit. And if it is not there, you can't graduate. So I took 2 physical education classes. And many of you probably have seen me walking on campus quite extensively. It's something that I picked up from that class, that the concept of body, mind, and character as a single entity, a trinity, if I were to evoke the Christian nomenclature. It's very, very important, that the mind is important, but if the physical is not activated, it can have an impact on the mind, and ultimately it can have an impact on character. Well, it sounds very religious, but I do take that very seriously. So I took 2 courses that were not for that were not for credit. They were not credit bearing, but they were required for you to graduate. And of course, here at the University of Johannesburg, we have an example of that. The introductory course in artificial intelligence, everybody has to take. Of course, they have to complete, but it does not bear any credits on the transcript of of a student. And maybe going forward, we should think about putting it in the statement without necessarily bearing any credit. And the second one is obviously the Africa Insights module, which also serves the same purpose. Then the second aspect about American education that I appreciated was they wanted us to take social science and humanity classes. In South Africa, I don't see that distinction much, the distinction between social science and humanities. In fact, the Faculty of Humanities that Professor Naidu leads even has social sciences. So in essence, humanities incorporate social sciences. But when I was an undergrad student, they said, no, there are two types of courses. You have humanities, you have social sciences, and you are supposed to take both. As an engineer, you are supposed to take both. If you take six humanities, you must take 6 social sciences. Of course, it's half-half. You will say, but what is the distinction? The distinction was that one pair was supposed to be in one area. So if you choose that you are going to take psychology, and psychology is humanities, 6 psychology classes, then you can go and pick 6 different social science classes. You don't have to take one. So one pair must be in a single discipline, and if it is in humanities, the other pair must be in social sciences. So I think that was very, very important. Later on, today now, in the era of artificial intelligence and the 4th industrial revolution, one of the most important algorithms is what is called reinforcement learning. And I always tell my engineering friends that I was not taught reinforcement learning in an engineering class. The first time I was taught reinforcement learning was actually in a psychology class. Now, when I was being taught reinforcement learning in a psychology class, I never thought it was going to serve to reinforce my understanding of engineering concepts. How do you design an algorithm that uses reinforcement learning to solve a particular problem? So multidisciplinarity is actually one thing that I really, really appreciated. Of course, the third part was the international nature of a place. Cleveland is not necessarily New York by a stretch of any imagination. In fact, Cleveland is a post-industrial, it's a post-industrial town. It's those towns that were centers of industrialization, steel mills, and when they disappeared from the scene because of the economic forces largely coming from Asia, it became a ghost town, and literally it became a ghost town, almost to the point that I remember going to nightclubs that were inside warehouses that used to store industrial things, but those things no longer existed at the time. They no longer exist even today, but now at least they've turned it into apartment buildings. So despite the fact that it is a backwater, I really enjoyed the experience. And one of the things that I always tell young people who are going to take international positions. Just this week, one of my PhD student, Rendani, I was bidding him farewell. Former PhD student, he completed and taking up a lectureship at Queen Mary University of London. That you have to immerse yourself into the culture of the place where you operate. I think that is very, very important. So I immersed myself into the American experience. I was a member of a fraternity, but I worked hard. But I also wanted to learn, because I understood that education is more than what you learn in the classroom. After that, I decided to pursue postgrad. Again, it was because one of the things that we used to be taught when we were undergrad, I remember the words a bachelor's degree is no longer the first degree. It was emphasized quite extensively by our professors that we have to do postgrad. Certainly not PhD, but at least a master's. It seemed to be what everybody was doing, and ultimately I came back to University of Pretoria. I was supposed to go to Wits University, and I really changed to University of Pretoria in the last minute. One thing that really excited me about University of Pretoria at the time, 1996, 1997, was that I was going to do my master's in mechanical engineering in Afrikaans, and I felt that that was going to be a much more different experience than going to Wits. Wits seemed to be like, at the time, it seemed to be like, the extension of what I was doing in the United States. So I went and did my master's degree at the University of Pretoria. We had to take 8 courses, and I can assure you, all those 8 courses, I took them in Afrikaans. I was sitting in a classroom where the professor was speaking in Afrikaans. Sounds very, very impressive, but not quite, because the technical Afrikaans is very English. I don't know whether I'm making it correctly, Or you can see it the other way around, that English and Afrikaans are Germanic languages. So if you understand one, you are not completely lost in another, And when you talk about technical terms, the distance between the two becomes even narrower. Of course, there will be a little bit of words that you have to think a little bit, equation, calculating. But but if you check equation, something that are equal, calculating something that looks alike, So I went and did a master's at Pretoria, and then I went and did a PhD at Cambridge. But I was not really sure what I was going to do a PhD on. I was not sure what is the PhD going to be on. And I went and met Mr. Caladine, and every time I walk around our campus and I look at our infrastructure, and I imagine how much our infrastructure is being used or not being used, I recall one of the first words that Professor Caladine who told me. So when I told him that I was from South Africa, he says to me, I have been to South Africa as a visiting professor to a university called University of Stellenbosch. And he goes on. And he says, the infrastructure, wow, if I were to quote his words, something that we can only dream about here, And then he made then he made a statement that haunts me until today. He says, but nobody seemed to know what to do with the infrastructure. So every time I walk around our campus and I go to our labs and I see fancy infrastructure, I imagine whether if another version of Professor Caladine come to our campus, we will be accused of not utilizing the impressive equipments that are available. And whenever I was a dean of engineering, I used to see equipments that are expensive, not even cheap, that I was quite convinced that this is a one professor equipment. And if an equipment, if the professor leaves, then that equipment lay to waste. That worries me. And of course, it is not something that just worries me. It's something that I've seen happening. We used to have a clean room. Clean room is, is those experiments to do with computers and measuring devices, where people wear, clothes that cover them all through, Silicon Valley type of clothes, nothing should be exposed because it will contaminate the environment. And the professor passed on, and Professor Pierre Laquette moved to Wits University, and nobody was using that equipment. And Professor Kinterbecker was a dean of science. And we learned that the equipment have moved to Wits. And he came to me and said, but who authorized this? We can use them in the Faculty of Science. So utilizing the infrastructure that we have and utilizing it optimally is very, very important. Yeah, so I went, ultimately I found a topic, artificial intelligence, because I was sitting next to Nando de Freitas. He works for Google. He's actually a South African. He told me that he was doing artificial intelligence. I'm sure now you're saying you must be thinking, this man must be a follower. He studied mechanical engineering because his friend was going to study mechanical engineering. And he studied artificial intelligence because Nando de Freitas was studying artificial intelligence. I don't think there is anything wrong with drawing motivation from others. Life is not a competition to be the first one to do, to make certain choices. We make choices by looking at our surroundings and speaking to people and making those choices. I think that is what rational decision making is all about. So I went and finished a PhD. I always feel I should have stayed a little bit longer. I always feel that leaving Cambridge before 3 years expired to go and take a postdoctoral fellowship in London was a little bit rushed because education comes with exposure, with time, and I appreciate that very much. And there were certain things that I covered in my PhD that I would say, yeah, it was, I could understand them, but I would have benefited more if I had stayed longer. And then finally, I went to Imperial College, where I was a postdoc. Again, in all these areas, the people that I encountered are still either my friends or my collaborator. Just recently, me and Fernando from Brazil and Daniel Muller from Tel Aviv, we wrote a book, and I asked my supervisor from my postdoc to write the foreword. So you never should lose touch with people who have touched you. And then I came back to South Africa. I really did not know what I was going to do. Firstly, when I went to take a postdoctoral fellowship at Imperial College, University of London, then I had been offered an associate professorship at the University of Pretoria. So I told them, no, maybe not. That was after my postdoc. So I was offered an associate professorship at the University of Pretoria. And then in the last minute, I get recruited to go to South African breweries. And when I went to this interview, at Hyde Park in London, I literally must have arrived at the interview venue just 5 minutes before the interview. I literally was running, And I was saying that if I don't arrive on time, I am not going to get inside. I'm just going to cancel the interview, and that will be it. I'm going to University of Pretoria and become an academic. But I decided that as an engineer, I must have hands-on experience. So I must go to industry. So I went to South African breweries. But I promised University of Pretoria that I am going to go there after 2 years. Of course, after 2 years, I went to another university, not University of Pretoria. Again, the working with, was one thing that I've seen. We are all academics, and some of you will know what I'm talking about here. There is sometimes in academia, we solve the problems we can solve, especially when you are doing a PhD. The supervisor is not going to give you the most difficult problem, like, for example, find the closed form solution of the Navier-Stokes equation, which after you find it, you qualify to receive a $1 million award. It's one of the unsolved problems. Some of these problems have been unsolved for more than this particular one has been unsolved for more than 200 years. So if somebody gives you such a problem, they won't give you such a problem not because it does not have a solution, but because it is a difficult problem that has defeated generations after generations of top thinkers over the last almost 200 years. So there's a tendency to solve the problems that we can solve. It's a tendency to abandon things that we can solve and solve the problems that we can solve. And but in industry, they have a different view. If there is a problem, by that time, one of the problems they were solving was that can we create an artificial beer taster, which I finally did. Easy problem, or how do we sustain the foam of a beer? Doesn't sound like a big existential problem to solve. It's not like a pharmaceutical, somebody trying to find a vaccine for COVID-19, which is a life or death experience. But nonetheless, I found that in industry, if there is a problem that needs to be solved, you need to solve it. The solution might not be perfect. It might be, it might not even be, it might be just incremental, but nonetheless, it is important to solve. So I decided to come back to academia. I always say that brewing beer was fun. Brewing beer and tasting it was even more fun. But brewing people is even more and more and more fun. Brewing people, nurturing people, supervising people, and so on and so forth, which is what I could only get from academia. So I decided to leave the brewery and went to the university down the road. That's university. That was before I saw the light that there is the university up the road and up, in every sense of the word. So I was a professor at Wits for 7 years. But one thing that I really always kept as an academic, firstly, the multidisciplinary nature of my work has always been part of who I am. We just today we just got a book that I co-wrote with the head of Department of Political Science and International Relations, Dr. Baso Nzenze. This morning we got a letter that the book that we submitted, the completed book that we submitted to Palgrave Macmillan, has been accepted. And it is on artificial intelligence and international relations theory. You know, how is artificial intelligence changing the theories of international relations? You have to have a multidisciplinary mindset to be able to do that, because it means you have to work with somebody with different capabilities, important but different capabilities, to solve a problem that cannot be solved if you do not have that person or a person from that discipline. And they won't be able to solve it if they don't have a person from your discipline. And under normal course of things, the disciplines will not meet. Because if you are in international relations, it's very easy to collaborate with a political scientist, because you are normally occupying the same space. You are in the same faculty, you are even in the same departments, you are in the same meetings. The difficulty is for somebody who is in humanities to go and collaborate with somebody who is in education or who is, and that is the environment that we need to create. That is the environment where we need to create. And one of the things that I really is an unfinished business is to have a big canteen. And I saw this at Imperial College, where all our staff, when you go there, it is buzzing with all our staff, so that they can start talking to one another. They are not going to collaborate if they are not talking to one another. Something that we still need to do. At the postgraduate level, at the postgraduate school, the idea of having such a school ultimately is to get postgraduate students from all the disciplines to occupy the same space and exchange ideas and exchange problems and exchange solutions and collaborate and work together, because it is through that we are going to tackle some of the biggest intellectual problems of our time, the problems of technology and security. Right now, we are watching what is happening in Ukraine. It's about politics, but it is also about technology, nuclear technology, that one country actually has nuclear arsenals. And if you have nuclear arsenals, people will think twice before they confront you. Certainly physically confront you. So multidisciplinarity has been very, very important. Secondly, and that multidisciplinarity must actually extend to the way we recruit our postgraduate students. I mean, I have had students from all over the world. In fact, I was doing the count. I've supervised 37 PhDs to completion, which is quite significant. And they came from more than 20 different countries, in the rest of the African continent, but in the rest of the world. I mean, I've had a student from Brazil who physically came and spent 5 years on our campus. I have had students from Tel Aviv, who came and sat in our campus and learned from us for 4 years. From, of course, Asia, India, and China is obvious. You always have students from Asia, from India and China, but also Pakistan. And some of these people, some of these countries, you might even view them as antagonistic. Like, for example, a student from Tel Aviv and a student from Jordan, for example, And as a leader, you must be able to navigate complex environments like that, because that is a complex environment, because it mirrors the big global issues that are confronting us as a society. Not taking any sides, because you can't take any sides when they are occupying the same space. You have to listen to both sides. And this is if it's not handled, and we have worked in medical sciences. Thank God to David Rubin, who introduced me to that dimension, that element of my research, Professor Rubin from West University. I have worked in political science, including international relations, thanks to Professor Monica Lagazio from Italy, who introduced me to that dimension of the subject long before people started thinking about it 12 years ago. I've worked in rationality, thanks to Ted Metz, who used to be our professor. Now he's at University of Pretoria, who actually really introduced me to that subject. It was through conversations, meaning of life, meaning in life. Why are we here? Are we rational agents, or are we emotional agents? And what are the implications on our decision making? They say our rational aspect, our emotional aspects actually impairs our decision making. But Kahneman says no, even our rational aspect, because it's truncated and is full of heuristics and biases, impairs our decision making. And somebody might say, maybe it is the emotional aspects of ours hidden. It's hidden. We think it is rational. I think we are using system 2, if I'm to use the nomenclature of Kahneman. So now, what are some of the key lessons that I can leave you with? I think as an academic, you should read, and you should read widely. And this culture of reading and reading widely, I was hoping that many of our deans would take it, because I read every month for our community. You are welcome on this Friday. I hope to see you when I will be reading the 17th century book by Adam Smith on the wealth of nations. It's an economic book, but it is nonetheless very, very important. I read Max Weber, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. I was so interested in the relationship between religion and economics. That I went and further and read 3 more books. I think Friedman wrote another one that not our Friedman. This is the American Friedman. Went and read another book, wrote another book that I also read. Creativity. I got that from the tweet by Bill Gates, and I went and read it and invited staff and students to come read it. So you have to read and read widely. I think that is very important. Secondly, you have to be willing to incorporate ideas that are from outside your discipline. When I was finishing a PhD, somebody said the measure of how successful you shall be as a researcher will be determined by how much you move away from your PhD topic. I don't know. So suppose if you look at people who have had impactful work, and you compare that impactful work to their PhD topics, apparently the higher the distance, or not the higher the distance, it so happens that they tend to have moved away from their discipline. I did not want to use the higher the distance, because there will be people who have moved away from their disciplines and they won't do impactful work. So I think that is quite important. Internationalize your research agenda. Don't forget about funding. I think funding is very, very important. Don't forget to teach. Sometimes as professors, we don't want to teach. I was a Sachi chair. I was one of the first Sachi chair. I was the Sachi chair of artificial intelligence at Wits University in 2006. And the Sachi chair, specifically, the initial one, certainly the contract that I signed in 2006, used to discourage you from teaching. And we went and told them that, no, where are you going to get the students if they don't see you in the classroom? Where are you going to get good postgraduate students if you have not taught? Them? So don't forget that teaching is very much part of our research agenda. Whatever you do in your research agenda must find its way to the classroom. Now, I know I've been speaking for almost an hour, so I would have loved to be speaking for another hour, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor. I think this was an excellent presentation, very deep and informative. I'm going to open up for some questions, and I'm looking for questions on the chat. So I think feel free, colleagues, to raise any questions. But while I'm waiting for questions, maybe I'll just mention that from all of us, condolences on the loss of your father. I see there's comments in the chat. And it's quite informative that you began with the influence of your father. So perhaps you can comment a bit on who inspired you and the role of role models and mentors. We're placing quite a lot of emphasis on mentors and how mentors can help to shape the careers of staff members. Do you think that mentorship is significant, and how significant for us?
No, absolutely. I mean, mentors are very, very important. I'm lucky to have been mentored by great teachers. I've already talked about my father, but also my grandmother. My grandmother was probably my biggest mentor. My grandmother couldn't read or write, but my ability to understand the complexity of the world I can certainly place it at my grandmother's mentorship. You know, being exposed to complex things that are happening in society at an early age. When I was home, I was relating a story that we used to share a sleeping room with my grandmother. I used to, until I was maybe 10. And there was a neighbor, a lady, Upopi, who was our neighbor. And every morning she will just walk, and then there was a fence between the two, and then she would, get through the fence and come and gossip about the stories of the village. I knew who was the father of who, and so on and so forth. I suppose she did not think I would. She thought I was young enough to take notice, and she'll do this every day. Being exposed to complex topics at a young age, I think was a very good mentorship. It was not intended to be a mentorship, but I was listening to these conversations. It was gossip.
So gossip is good.
Who's fighting who, why, what happened, and she will start by saying, have you heard? Have you heard? So my grandmother was my first engineering mentor. She used to make clay pots and so on and so forth. And then formally, something that we don't do here. When I was an undergraduate student, every student had what they call an advisor.
Mm.
An advisor is like your mentor. So whenever you register for courses, like here, people go to the online system and they register for courses, students. Of course, at that point, it was a form, and then you specify the courses that you're going to take. And there will be courses like humanity courses that you have to take, technical electives that you have to take, and so on and so forth, that you have to choose. Every registration had to have a signature of your mentor. They were called, they were not supervisors, they were called advisors. Advisors. And my advisor was Professor Michael Adams, who actually died last year. He was a good mentor. And he was a good mentor also for what happened in the classroom, and also what happened outside the classroom. For example, when my grandmother, who was my mentor, died, she died in 1992, and I was in the United States. I informed my advisor, just to, out of courtesy that, my grandmother has died. And within few hours, all my professors had called me, which means when I informed him, all he did was to go and look to my record and say, he's taking this class, who is the professor? And he calls the professor, and so on and so forth, and many of them were telling me that, please take time to mourn your grandmother. We are going to arrange a special session for you to catch up. So that was very important mentorship, And then the third part, which is something, and we need to create that sort of mentorship. I know with the staff to student ratios that we have, it's almost impossible. But now we have almost 500 postdoctoral fellows. How do we incorporate them as mentors of our students, just to guide the student? If you are having difficulties, what are some of the ways in which you can be able to get out of those difficulties? Yeah, that is that is an important form of mentorship. The second one was, when I was a PhD student. I can't remember an instance where I went to my supervisor with an intellectual problem. Because the ecosystem, the postdocs were there and other PhD students were just so many that, if you had any question or you were doubting or you wanted somebody to look at your ideas, you had many people who could look at your ideas. So our peers are also our mentors, can also be our mentors. I mean, as academics, we are used to peer review, So that is why things like the postgraduate school, that is why the expansion of our infrastructure is so important. We bought Media 24, and we want to buy the white building next to the tower. It's called Diners Club. It's huge, and we are going to have a sky bridge to Bunting Road. And what we are thinking is that it should be an ecosystem of our postdocs and postgraduate students and our professors to interact as mentors. So mentorship is very important. Thank you.
Thanks, VC. So we'll start with the first question on the chat. We're looking for some advice from you on research impact. So the question here is, what is the best advice for a young academic, and how do we ensure that our research has a deep impact?
Well, somebody said we hope that what we do will have impact. I think what we need to do is to do good research, solve good problems, use the best tools to solve those problems, and use the best platforms to publicize your solutions, your journals that you choose, and so on and so forth. So it starts with asking the right questions. And unfortunately, our education system does not encourage asking questions. My perception of a South African classroom is a professor, dictating to students. It's not quite like that, because students actually interact. But the interaction, I have the feeling that there's more interaction between the professor and the students in North America than in South Africa. And there's some cultural aspect. It starts with the informal nature of North America. I couldn't quite understand why 18-year-olds were calling old men and women by their first names. I couldn't quite understand that. And some people say, it's part of a creative ecosystem, because that young man must not hesitate to discredit an idea that deserves to be discredited, that comes from the supervisor, for example. So that is important, to create an environment that encourages dialogue, open dialogue, where there are no holy cows. The second thing is, I think it was Albert Einstein. He said, the measure of how clever you are is not by how many questions you can answer, but by how many questions you can pose. This idea of questioning is almost dialectical. I think it was Plato, who came with this style of inquiry, asking questions and answers, questions and answers. I think I read Plato's work where he was talking, where it was a dialogue, effectively a dialogue. Of course, it is contextualized during that time, because he will only say by Zeus. Zeus was the god of the Greek god at the time. Answering some of the questions that I would not invoke the religion to answer them. So I think ask questions, choose exciting and important questions that needs to be answered. Equip yourself with the latest tools of analysis and the latest knowledge, and choose the correct journals. And if you get those right, the impact is going to come.
Thank you for that. The next question is about how we overcome challenges, and then maybe I can illustrate that by saying that in the current post-COVID world, we're beginning to see a lot of academics giving up on their academic roles. What advice could we give people? What pearls of wisdom could we share on how to overcome these challenges more broadly?
Well, you have to be resilient. You have to be resilient. There's something about resilience that we do not emphasize enough. And I think certainly in the Western culture, I see the relaxation of the resilience. When I go to China and many parts of Asia, I see the ramping up of resilience, in the sense that the kids are expected to be in the classroom for longer hours. And after those longer hours, they go to supplementary schooling, that's building resilience, understanding that nothing comes without hard work. But now that you have linked it with COVID, COVID is probably the biggest health issue that has, certainly for me, it is the biggest health crisis that I have witnessed in my 50 years here on this planet. So we should not downplay that for many of us, this is unprecedented. In fact, for all of us, I don't care how old you are. The people who were there during the Spanish flu are no longer here today. So I don't care how old you are. You have not witnessed a country being shut down for 2 years. I don't know, maybe the Second World War, maybe the Second World War. I think London was probably closed for a considerable amount of period. So and with all the implications to our mental health and many other factors. So I don't want to downplay that. That there is the medical side of the problem that we can't neglect. That seek help, seek medical help when you feel that you are experiencing issues of depression and so on and so forth. Issues that require professional solution. You shouldn't hesitate to do that. And as a university, we should ramp up our ability to detect and assist in time. The second thing is that the pandemic has devastated our economy. I mean, we as academics have been spending quite a bit of time with people in the private sector. I was horrified to learn that quite a lot of people in the private sector had to have salary cuts to manage the pandemic. And many of them had to lose jobs. But I would say that the academic life, the idea that we are going to be downsizing was never even an issue for consideration. So I do appreciate that the academic employment, certainly in the COVID, during the COVID period, I can't talk about the future, but certainly during the COVID period, was such that none of our no one was threatened from an employment perspective. But obviously, it's more than that. It's more than job security. It's also about, isolation. It's also about the burden of diseases. Many of us actually experience the disease itself. So how do we navigate out of this? We should just come together, discuss issues, go back to what makes a university great, and so on and so forth. We should just do it and seek help, and look at our colleagues, so that if they need help, we are part of the solution, not part of the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. There's another question that may relate to what you've just said. And the question is, how does one develop commensurate with changes in the world within institutional structures that remain in a time warp? Do we have institutional structures in a time warp, and is that inhibiting our ability to develop? VC?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we are living in a time of change. The nature of our economy is changing. I'm reading a book on, it's a very good book. I completely recommend it. I'm going to tell you what the book is called. It's called Beyond Bitcoin. It's talking about Bitcoin, but it's more than that. Talking about the changing nature of the world of finance, with blockchain, transaction happening instantly without the need to settle, settlement time. Now, if you transfer money from one bank to another, it's not instant. It has to go to some suspense account, and then there is a settlement that has to be done between the two banks. That's why even if you are doing it instantly, which means they take a risk, they insure. That's why you pay more. They insure for that transaction not to happen. So and in higher education, the changes are also there. Changes of the nature of the sizes of our classrooms, changes in terms of the blended learning is becoming very, very, and we already did this even before the pandemic. But it is clear that the purely physical classroom is definitely a thing of the past. That going into the future is a combination of both. It is about us as academics to prepare ourselves for that change. One of the things that I bemoan academia is that we never prepare people to teach in the first place. We never do. I have never gone to a teacher's training. I've never done a university education diploma or its equivalent that teaches me on how to behave in front of a classroom. And I just got a postdoc, and somebody told me that I was ready to teach. And to be honest, I'd never really stood in front of anybody in any classroom before then. And when I was put in front of a classroom, the student complained that this professor is talking to the board. He never even looks at us. And Professor Ian Janzel says, "Hey, my man, your voice is not loud enough. So we are going to send you to the voice clinic at Oxford Road." You see that voice clinic at Oxford Road, you know? I was a client. I was a client, you know. And we need to teach people to be adjusted to this new reality. We should not make the old assumptions that just because we are here, we can adapt. We can't. We have to create an environment for that adaptation to technology, to new ways of doing things, to blended classrooms, you know, all those things. We must, our Faculty of Education must have programs that are designed for that. I've seen programs at the business school about business in the post-COVID world. How about education in the post-COVID world course, where all our staff are required to take so that they are much more adjusted to this new environment. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to come back to the teaching question, but there's a question from a young academic who asks, how should a student go about choosing an academic mentor? So we're taking you back to the mentor question. How do you choose a mentor? How do you know this is your mentor and this mentor is going to have a good impact on you?
I think firstly, you must get along with the mentor. I think that's very important, you know. It should be somebody that that you can get along with. Secondly, you know, there must be some alignment between what you are doing and what that person is doing. So I think that is quite important. That there has to be some alignment. If it is an academic mentor and you are teaching psychology, somebody who is closer to the discipline of psychology will probably be a better academic mentor than somebody who is a professor of mining engineering. You know, so you really have to have an alignment. And thirdly, it should ideally be somebody who is willing to put resources into your. I don't want to sound materialistic, you know, but you know, the people I've mentored, I have used my trust fund to send them to a conference. So somebody who can be able to financially assist you to meet your goals, your academic goals, it's actually quite important, you know. And thirdly, the person must have time. There's no point of getting a mentor who is extremely busy, whom you wouldn't be able to pick up the phone and call them and get them at least within 5 or 6 hours. They will be back to you to find out what are the issues and assist you. Thank you.
Thank you. So Prof Marwala, as deans, most of the deans struggle with the challenges from staff in respect of the balance between teaching and research. So there's a question here that asks, how would you advise young academics deal with the notion of publish or perish, balancing teaching and research. So I think also there's perhaps a need to understand, is there a smart way of managing teaching and research? How do we do it in line with publish or perish?
Look, I mean, I don't think we have the principle of public or perish. I think we took it from we took it from Americans, because in America, when they say publish or perish, literally what they mean if you are in an academic track, and they call that tenure track, and you're given 5 years to get your house in order. If you don't publish, you are not going to get tenure. They will ask you to leave the university after 5 years. I mean, that's really what it means. And we don't have that here,
But we give you a low performance scores.
We a low performance score, but that performance score is more than just research. It's also about fundraising. It's also about your teaching and learning. It's also about the courses that you have developed. It's also about your contribution to the department. It's actually much broader than just one metric. It's a very important metric, as Professor Sorab Sina will keep reminding me. It's a very important metric. Nonetheless, how do you keep the balance? See, I mean, I don't want to sound controversial. When I was a dean, I knew what to get from whom. There will be people who were very research orientated and who will manage their teaching workload, because we wanted to bring the best of the people. Then there will be people who were great teachers. I think of Peter Nottenbelt, seeing his former students last week, throwing him a huge party at Melrose Arch. He was an excellent teacher, but he was not a good researcher. And the university needs both. And as a young academic, you will have to develop both. Firstly, identify what is your strength and negotiate your strength with your line manager. If you are really, really into research, then you will have to negotiate a lesser workload as a teacher. Of course, the dean will say, how much units are you producing? If you are producing 6 units per year, I'm sure your teaching workload will be lower than somebody who is producing 1 unit per year, because you balance the scales, I'm tempted to say that the researchers must avoid teaching. I say, no, you must be in the classroom. You can't be a good researcher if you are not interacting with the students. The biggest problem, this is the American trap that we should not fall into. That if you go to undergrads, the people who teach undergrads, first year, second year undergrads, are not your senior professors. I think our teaching first year undergrad requires our most experienced teachers, because the damage that can be done in the first year can be quite extensive, And those are some of the issues. So it's not just the question of you balancing on your own. It's you, your boss, your head of department, and your dean sitting down and looking at your capabilities and looking at your performance and looking at your aspiration and crafting an agenda for you that will be able to exploit the best that you can offer to the University of Johannesburg. Maximize the best that you can offer to the University of Johannesburg. Thank you.
Thank you, BC. Before we go to the next question, and since you're talking about research, I'm just curious about how you managed the phenomenal achievement of 23 books. What is the secret to having a busy academic life and yet alongside that being VC to continue to publish books? How does one publish 23 books?
Oh, well, I mean, it's over a long period of time, and much of it I was not VC. The overwhelming majority of it I was not VC. So, no, I think when I became a dean, I could see that there are two types of deans, Professor Naidu. They are academic deans and they are administrative deans. And if you go to South Africa, the deans tend to be administrative. If you go to India, the dean, especially when you go to IIT and the top universities, the deans tend to be academic deans. They're very active. They are deans, but they are very active in research and supervision and so on and so forth. If you go to England, they tend to be academic deans. You know, I've never been, you know, they tend to be academic deans. And part of the reason is because obviously research is very, very important. And secondly, because they tend to get the most active researchers to take leadership role. So I chose to be an academic dean. And I found that you know, the idea of spending the Friday afternoons with students was very complementary to my work as a leader of the faculty. I was able to pick up things that I would otherwise not have picked up if I had confined myself to meeting the higher-ranking members of the faculty, you know. And the same goes as you go up. And if you check, we probably have the most academic senior leadership team in the country. I mean, if you just look at the MEC, Professor Sina published a book, I think 2 books last year. Professor Mbedi published 2 books last year. And I published a book last year. So we are a very academic leadership cohort. Not everybody, but certainly we are. If I compare us to vets, even though now the appointment of a new deputy vice chancellor for research at vets is talking of an academic slant. But if you go and check University of Cape Town, they are not. Their leadership cohort is not academic. I don't think the leadership cohort of University of Pretoria is academic. With the departure of the previous deputy vice chancellor for research. So yeah, so those are the models that I'm trying to build at the University of Johannesburg. Thanks.
Thank you for that. There's a very nice question here. It says, thank you, Prof Marwala, for such an inspiring talk about your journey. My question is, what advice would you give to someone who started off as a teacher academic, but diverted into the professional support domain in higher education regarding enriching his or her research profile? What opportunities are there for such people? What support does the university give to such people, the support people?
Look, I mean, the move from the professional to the academic is something that we encourage at the University of Johannesburg. I'll give you an example. Professor Shirin Mutala, she was in the support side of the university, and now she's a chaired professor. So it's a good example of that move. And I have an example of somebody who was a technician in our department of engineering and ended up with a PhD and became an academic. So we need to incentivize more. I mean, the big incentive is that you can study for free. You can study for free. I mean, there's somebody also in engineering who used to be in IT and now is completing a PhD. So the incentive is fee remission. The second incentive is certainly whenever a situation comes my way, maybe we should make it more systematic. When people want to go and attend a conference, for example, we have supported them from the support domain, provided there are certain conditions. Is there a publication that is going to come out of this so that we can be able to recoup our investment? So, yeah.
Thank you for that. There's a couple of more questions that I think we'll deal with, at least three more. One comment is, Prof Marwala, thank you for sharing your journey. I'm fascinated with the serendipitous elements in your narration. Please, could you discuss to what degree you think multidisciplinary academic and research journey was a planned strategy or maybe an emergent strategy? Was it planned or just an emergent strategy?
Well, I think it was planned. I certainly think that if I did not get the multidisciplinary educational experience that I got in the United States, I'm pretty much sure I would have been very single dimensional, because you have to live multidisciplinarity in order to incorporate it into your personal culture. It's far much more difficult for somebody who went and studied only engineering subjects to become multidisciplinary than somebody who studied engineering plus some social sciences plus some humanity classes, So it has to be part of our curriculum. It has to be part of our curriculum now more than ever before, out of economic necessity, that multidisciplinarity is prized. A technology that does not understand people is misguided and ultimately is going to be thrown out of the market. So for it to understand people, the developer of that technology must have studied psychology, sociology, and all aspects that are going to enhance the person's understanding of the human agent.
Thank you so much. There's another question here. The question is related to this. What is your observation of industry's reaction towards multidisciplinary training? Some ex-student told me about their degree, which UJ pioneered, but how to find a job some years back. So how do we observe industry's receptiveness towards our multidisciplinary training?
Well, I think the reception is actually quite good. I am not a big fan of of the creation of a multidisciplinary program. What I advocate is that every program at the University of Johannesburg should actually be multidisciplinary. You know, if you are studying psychology, that psychology degree must be multidisciplinary. Because when I look at what is happening in North America, the multidisciplinarity is not, is somebody studying mechanical engineering. It's only when you go and look at the courses that you see the multidisciplinary. So when the person goes out there, they don't look any different from what the market expects, because market expectation is something that we as leaders of a university must not lose sight of. So we shouldn't be dreaming things that when somebody goes out into the marketplace, the market will not know what we are talking about. But the infusion of multidisciplinarity is really what I'm talking about in all our programs. Those in the social and humanities subjects courses must also do technological and science courses into their curricula, and vice versa.
Thank you so much. And now we come to some of the fun questions. There's a question here saying, thanks, a most thorough, thought-provoking presentation, VC. I've been on the academic side at UNISA Psychology, but joined UJ in support. You mentioned something about clubbing. How much of partying, clubbing did you indulge in your student days?
I'm not going to reveal everything, but certainly I was a member of a fraternity. So, and fraternities are notorious for clubbing. You see, Cleveland is not cold. It's not warm during winter. It's minus 20 degrees Celsius was a normal temperature, So I did go to few clubs. In fact, in my book, leadership lessons from the books I have read, I can't remember what chapter it was about. I talk about going to a UB40 concert in a warehouse and linking that to unemployment, because UB40 is actually a name of an unemployment benefit form in the United Kingdom. So yeah, I did go to. I mean, I have a for the Black South African. I have a very strange musical taste, if I can put it that way. People get shocked when they hear that one of my favorite groups is Guns N' Roses. I'm sure Dr. Mashinini, you don't know what I'm talking about. When I say Guns N' Roses, I went to a concert of 4 non-blondes. You have to come from the 90s, You have to come from the 90s and a particular culture to be able to know who the 4 non-blondes are. It's not exactly Michael Jackson, who was mainstream. So yeah, I think I was a well-rounded person in that sense. That I did all those things. But responsibly. I went to a nightclub, but I went to a nightclub responsibly. I never went on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I used to go on Thursday. Thursdays I used to go because that was the time in which they had happy hour. Happy hour means beer was half price. So I'll go to a nightclub.
Yeah, I have noted your multidisciplinary existential question. How do we sustain the foam of beer, you asked.
Exactly.
And Dr. Menon just writes red wine, just to add to your...
No, absolutely. And there was a lot of red wine that evening. Yeah.
All right. So I think we are coming to the end. I don't see any other questions. I see a lot of positive sentiments about the talk, and just trying to see if there's anything else. And knocking on heaven's door, Dr. Menon is in full cry today. So
No,
thank,
for me, it's more like welcome to the jungle.
welcome to the jungle. I wonder if there's any other last minute questions. I think we have asked our VC all the questions we can. We've learnt a lot. And I don't know if Dr. Menon wants to come in and say something.
No, this was so inspiring. Thank you very much, VC. It's very rare in higher education, and I think I'm an old dog in the sector, for a vice chancellor to share so frankly and openly with young academics and some seasoned academics here your own academic journey. And I think that it's so important. And I'm actually feeling quite inspired to run a session for our students as well, because they should know what academic leadership is all about. And we've all been inspired by this. And every journey provides us with some thoughts and reflections for ourselves, and things to think about. So thank you very much for such a thought-provoking talk and the frankness. And the next time we will organize music to your taste. But Prof. Naidu, may I ask everyone to please, Vice Chancellor, you're not going to be immune from an evaluation. So can participants please click on the Menti in the chat, and I'm sure you will join me in a round of applause for Prof. Naidu's able chairing, for our Vice Chancellor's sharing of his academic journey. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
And from my side, let me thank all of you attended. And I'd like special thanks to Angie Makabani, Megan Stradum, and of course to Dr. Menon and her team, the new Division for Teaching Excellence, for this great launch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And looking forward to session 2 and 3 that follow. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you. Just a reminder, please fill in the
idea started to write the first lines of code for software that will change.
Where's the original one?